1. MQ9 Reaper. What is a U.S. drone collision with a Russian plane and how is it used? The U.S. Air Force operates a number of drones, or UAVs for short, of which the MQ9 Reaper is the most popular. The collision between a Russian fighter jet and a U.S. MQ9 Reaper drone over the Black Sea has raised fears of an escalation in the conflict in Ukraine. Close encounters between Western and Russian aircraft are not unusual, but Tuesday's incident raised the risk because it prompted U.S. officials to land the drones in the sea. The use of drones or unmanned aerial vehicles in and around war zones has been going on for decades. Here's what we know about the MQ9 Reaper and how it has traditionally been deployed. What is the MQ9 Reaper? The MQ9 Reaper is a large unmanned aerial vehicle manufactured by military contractor General Atomics. It is remotely controlled by a two-man team, consisting of a pilot and a crew member operating the sensors and guiding the weapon. The plane is 11 meters long with a wingspan of more than 22 meters. The U.S. Air Force says its primary use is intelligence gathering, while highlighting its unique ability to conduct precision strikes against targets. Valuable and time-sensitive. Reaper can carry up to 16 Hellfire missiles, equivalent to the payload of an Apache helicopter. Reapers, like other UAVs, can fly at an altitude of 50,000 feet or 15 kilometers and can hover over targets for about 24 hours, making them useful for reconnaissance missions. Crucially, all of this happens with a crew still based in the United States, away from danger. During the 2018 calendar year, MQ9 Reapers flew a total of 325,000 hours for the U.S. Air Force, 91% of which were in support of combat operations. How popular are drones? UAVs have been in regular use since 1995, when the Reaper's predecessor, the Predator, was deployed to support NATO airstrikes in Serbia. The Predator was famous during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, where it was famous for causing a large number of casualties in so-called precision attacks. The Predator was retired in 2017, when the Reaper became the primary drone of the U.S. Air Force. The use of UAVs is now so widespread that in 2017 the U.S. Air Force had more jobs for drone operators than any other type of pilot. At the time, there were 1,000 drone pilots compared to 889 C-17 transport pilots and 803 F-16 pilots. How are drones used? Reaper drones deployed by the U.S. to the Black Sea area are used only for reconnaissance. However, last year U.S. media reported that the U.S. Air Force was considering giving older Reaper drones to Ukraine. Concerns about the transfer of sensitive technology and the risk of some being shot down have frozen those conversations. The use of drones outside of war zones, promoted under former U.S. President Barack Obama, has been controversial. According to the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, or BIJ for short, there have been a total of 563 attacks, mostly by drones, in Pakistan, Somalia and Yemen during Obama's two terms, compared with 57 attacks under the George W. Bush era. The BIJ estimates between 384 and 807 civilian deaths. In 2019, then U.S. President Donald Trump rescinded an Obama-era policy requiring U.S. intelligence to release the number of drone strikes outside of war zones. Which countries use Reaper drones? The U.S. Air Force is by far the largest buyer of Reaper drones. According to the U.S. Congressional Research Service, the Air Force has contracted for 366 Reapers since 2007, at an average cost of $28 million each. The UK has also deployed Reaper and its predecessor Predator to support their operations for a number of years. The Royal Air Force, or RAF, currently has 9 Reapers in service, with a further number on order. Like the US, the UK has accelerated its use of Reaper drones over the past decade. During the 4 years of war against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria from 2014 to 2018, the UK deployed Reaper drones on more than 2,400 missions, almost 2 a day. France, Italy, Spain, India, Japan and the Netherlands also operate Reaper drones. Many other countries have deployed UAVs with different designs. Pakistan and Turkey have developed their own programs in which Turkey uses powerful drones against Kurdish groups in their countries and northern Iraq. China has begun supplying its own drones to a range of countries, including the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia and Iraq, though not all of them, can also deploy what they have purchased. 2. Ukraine's newest fighter compared to the US F-16 Fighting Falcon. Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki on Tuesday said the delivery of Polish MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine could happen within the next 4 to 6 weeks. Poland needs a few weeks to refurbish these fighters, and more importantly, retrofit air-to-air missile launchers. Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki on Tuesday said his country could supply Ukraine with MiG-29 fighter jets within the next 4 to 6 weeks, the same day a bipartisan group of U.S. senators sent a letter to Ukraine. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin urged him to send F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. The addition of any fighter jets would give Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky an impetus, who has publicly called on his Western allies for months to supply his military with planes to support the conflict. Ukraine's war against the forces of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Although the United States has provided Ukraine with powerful weapons such as the High Mobility Artillery Missile System, or HIMARS, and the Javelin missile, as well as the promised M1 Abrams tank, President Joe Biden said still opposes handing over the F-16 to Ukraine. When comparing the MiG-29 to the F-16 Fighting Falcon, Guy McCardle, editor of the Special Operations Forces Report, SOFREP for short, told Newsweek that while the MiG-29 made for certain impressions, there are some key differences between the MiG-29 and the F-16. The MiG-29, which takes its name from its developer, the Russian design bureau Cohen, was first introduced in the 1970s before entering service with the Soviet Air Force in 1983. Also known as the Fulcrum, the MiG-29 is part of a class of fourth-generation fighter aircraft that first entered service in the 1970s and 1980s and continues to be in service today. The F-16 is also a fourth-generation fighter, entering service in 1979. Developed by General Dynamics for the United States Air Force, the F-16 Combat Falcon is currently in service with more than 24 armies. Country of use. American pilots will consider the low-speed maneuverability of the MiG-29 Fulcrum and the helmet-mounted sighting system to be two of the most impressive aspects of the aircraft, McCardle said. He added that while the MiG-29 has superior nose-to-head capability when flying at speeds below 200 knots, the F-16 is outstanding in such a capability at speeds above 200 knots. The turn rate on the F-16 is significantly better, he said. McCardle, also a 16-year veteran of the U.S. Army, says that Americans who have flown Fulcrums have reported that their visibility isn't nearly as good as the F-16's. They claim that F-16 pilots can see behind easily, while MiG-29 pilots cannot look back when turning in the cockpit. This is a clear disadvantage in enemy detection. To achieve supersonic speed, the MiG-29 did not have its central fuel tank. This significantly limits the range and length of time they can perform missions. Despite all the advantages the F-16 might have over the MiG-29, many Ukrainians on social media praised the news coming from Poland. Poland is ready to hand over MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine. Our troops will be able to use them immediately in combat operations, Kira Rudik, a member of Ukraine's parliament, tweeted on Wednesday.
Holding a shoulder-fired surface-to-air missile launcher. He fires twice, and then you'll see how much, obviously, that missile launcher recoils, right? You see that entire recoil turning away. And then you'll see the jet's wreckage still burning. And you can see what appears to be a white parachute. We don't know, obviously, what happened to that pilot. We do have new video of what appears to be a Russian hideout, though, that was destroyed. And there you'll see Russian fighters basically moving in between homes. And then, the Ukrainians, they filmed this, right? The drones see it. Once spotted, there's a strike. And you'll see that massive fireball right in that neighborhood right there, as you see. And Russia's losses that they are sustaining in this way, in place after place along the front line, is partly why Russia is now you're seeing a big ramp up in recruitment efforts. We're hearing it anecdotally from on the ground. And now we have new video of young children being taught to prepare to fight. This is video that we've obtained in Crimea. These are children in kindergarten through 8th grade. They are in annexed Crimea, learning how to assemble rifles. And that girl is pretty fast. They're learning tactical and physical training, we are told, along with radiation, chemical, and biological training. These types of classes are also taking place inside Russia, Wagner has its own youth club in St. Petersburg, and there are kids who now reportedly attend there are able to use drone simulators, reportedly. Russia is, though across the board, we do see turning to its youngest. There's been recruiting efforts in schools or boys as it faces mounting losses on the battlefield. And Melissa Bell is out front tonight.
Wagner fighters at an industrial plant inside Bakhmut. They are making very gradual advances, but at huge cost. This soldier says Ukrainian forces have vast amounts of ammunition and are heavily shelling the area. We can't even raise our heads, he says. Wagner has been trying to take Bakhmut for 2 months and may now be running short of fighters. Its boss, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has lashed out at the Russian Defense Ministry for starving his men of ammunition.
We need the military to shield the approaches. If they manage to do so, everything will be okay. If not, then Wagner will be encircled together with the Ukrainians inside Bakhmut.
In his latest social media post, Prigozhin praised honest Russian soldiers but claimed, quote, unprofessional scoundrels and intriguers crushed these modest guys and began to push them around and humiliate them. Yet another jibe at the military hierarchy in Moscow. Prigozhin has accused the Defense Ministry of incompetence and corruption and compared his own almost continuous presence in Bakhmut to the notable absence of Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu. But now Yevgeny Prigozhin, once a Kremlin ally and nicknamed Putin's chef, is a man under pressure. He recruited tens of thousands of men from Russian prisons, but they've endured horrendous losses, as many as 80% in some units. He's dredging Russian sports clubs for recruits, and his more experienced units are stretched as they try to encircle Bakhmut. Western analysts think that Prigozhin has fallen into a trap laid by Shoigu, a trap designed to weaken both Wagner and its boss. Just when Wagner most needs the support of the Russian military around Bakhmut, it's curiously absent. Russia's elite piling on the gruff, outspoken oligarch. Commentator Alexei Mukin accused Prigozhin of political ambitions and said he was an incompetent commander, adding, he has exposed the Wagner fighters to a major risk of encirclement from the expected counterattack. The Kremlin has long tolerated Prigozhin as Vladimir Putin's licensed disruptor. But if Wagner is decimated in an unsuccessful bid to take Bakhmut, he might find himself out in the cold. For now, Aaron, the battle for Bakhmut continues. The Ukrainians saying it's too early to draw conclusions one way or the other in this ongoing battle. What's also unclear at this stage is what happens with the battle within the battle and whether Yevgeny Prigozhin can come out unscathed. Aaron.
Melissa, thank you very much from Ukraine tonight. And out front now, Major General James Spider Marks. And General, can Putin afford, to let the Wagner group totally fail?
Well, no, he can't. He doesn't want them to fail. I tell you, Melissa's report was really phenomenal. The levels of detail and the analysis and the relationships and the internecine fighting that ostensibly takes place within Putin's hierarchy. It's not frightening. It's to be expected, I guess. But it really is a Game of Thrones kind of environment. No, Putin can't afford to lose the Wagner group. And I would tell you, if he were to lose Prigozhin, somebody else would step up. They'd be recruited in, and that individual will go about the business of creating a contract force, not unlike the Wagner group. The money exists, and they're going to go find the recruits, and they're going to pay folks. I mean, they've got the money to buy the kit and to buy the individuals. That doesn't mean they have the training. So I think Putin's kind of got himself a legitimate problem here, putting too much trust, too much freedom into Prigozhin's hand.
Well, you know what's interesting? I spoke to a Ukrainian soldier who's in Bakhmut, and he told me about, something that we've heard about, we've seen some video of, but it still sort of stuns to imagine, which is that the Wagner forces just literally run into machine gun fire, and they just run in and die en masse. And here's what he said.
I can't believe that real person can run without afraid to die, without no motivation, but they see how their fellows falling down and they continue running. Wagner have only one chance to survive is to take our position, our trenches. That's all. They have no choice to return to their position because they will be killed from their fellows.
I mean, it is amazing, General, to hear him say it, right? That, he sort of, and then I realized the key to their success, because they can't turn around. They know they're going to die. So their best shot is to run into machine gun fire.
Yeah, there is a distinct difference between the Ukrainian soldier who is fighting for the sovereignty and independence of his nation and the Russian conscripted and the contracted Wagner group individual. The Ukrainian soldier is going to fight for his buddies. He's fighting for his organization. He's fighting for those on his left and his right. And that individual is more frightened about letting them down than he is potentially dying in combat. The ones that are working for Wagner know that the end state is going to be death of some sort, so they really don't care. They are frightened of dying, but they are more frightened of taking a bullet in the head if they have to return. That's a distinctive difference. You have professional soldiers vis-a-vis these contracted, conscripted killers with no motivation other than the threat from a boss, feckless, horrible leadership that they're going to end their lives one way or the other. So they have no choice. It's really incredible.
It really is just incredible to think about it, though, just for a moment. If you try to imagine being in that position, which in a year ago, none of them could have possibly comprehended. And yet here they are rushing en masse to die. All right, General Marks, thank you very much. Donald Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, testifying again before a New York grand jury investigating hush money payments made to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Here he is on his way out of the courthouse tonight.
This isn't a question of vindication. It's not a question, as I stated before, about revenge. My position is that at the end of the day, Donald Trump needs to be held accountable for his dirty deeds if, in fact, that's the way that the facts play out.
Daniels also today meeting with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Trump has been invited to appear before the grand jury, which is the clearest indication yet that prosecutors are nearing a decision on whether to take the unprecedented step of indicting a former president. Out front now, Trump's attorney, Joe Tacopina. And Joe, I very much appreciate your time. So you just heard Michael Cohen coming out today, just moments ago. What's your response to him?
I mean, look, Alan Bragg once said, and I hope he remembers these words, he can't see a world in which he would base a prosecution of Donald Trump on the word of a convicted perjurer and felon like Michael Cohen. He's still a convicted perjurer. He's someone who was convicted of lying. And it's not about vengeance. It's all about vengeance for him. But putting that aside, Aaron, here's the question. Does anyone actually believe, anyone, left, right, middle, whatever, that if someone else were accused of paying hush money to avoid a public sex scandal in the manner that Donald Trump is alleged to have avoided a public sex scandal, they would be prosecuted? The answer is 100% no. And we cannot, as a society, again, pro-Trump, anti-Trump, left, right, want the weaponization of the justice system or a prosecutor's office to pursue political opponents with rule of law. And it's just not right. And that's exactly what's happening here.
I want to ask you about that. But first, on the point you said about Michael Cohen, convicted perjurer. Okay, yes, and he served his time. But the SDNY, the Southern District of New York, obviously is not going to indict based on what Michael Cohen says. If they were going to do that, they would have done that a long time ago. They corroborated it. They got their information. We know actually in front of the grand jury, they heard from other witnesses. Kellyanne Conway appeared there. Hope Hicks appeared there. Does any of that give you pause?
Yeah, I mean, well, it gives me confidence. It shouldn't give Alan Bragg pause. The federal prosecutor's office, Southern District of New York, is the top, the echelon, the holy grail, if you will, of prosecutors' offices in this country. They had plenty of time to indict former President Trump if they wanted to. They chose not to because they understand that campaign election law makes it very clear that there was no violation here. And Aaron, if there is no campaign law violation here, there is no case at all.
Well, I understand, someone who was involved in that the other day told me that, time had passed when that decision was made not to indict. They thought, well, you know what? They could have had more information. They could have figured it out. They're not going to move without having that. That's another way to look at this, right? That they got the goods.
Well, that they got the goods, they evaluated it, and they didn't go forward. The Manhattan DA's office, despite what they said about relying on Michael Cohen in the past, for 3 years, they have scoured Donald Trump's personal and business life. Scoured. And they've looked for a crime to fit the person. And again, I will say this is not, we should all be concerned about this. Whether you like or hate Donald Trump, we should all be concerned that they picked the person and are searching for the crime. If you read Mark Pomerantz's book, a guy who committed all sorts of ethical and, in my opinion, criminal violations by revealing secret grand jury information to a third party, his book, even he said that they picked Trump. He would have paid to prosecute Trump, which is a scary statement by a public prosecutor, but he would have paid to prosecute Trump. And they were looking for a crime to fit this person because he didn't like him.
Well, okay. Look, there's two questions there. One, if a crime is there, misdemeanor or felony, campaign fine, if a crime is there, right? You would agree, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, your second point on the politicization. I know last night, Joe, you said Donald Trump is going to win the election. If they bring this case, I believe it will catapult him into the White House. I believe it. That's what you said last night. But if that's the case, they surely would know that too. Why would they be going ahead and doing this for political reasons if it's only going to help him?
Listen, Aaron, they may not see it the way I see it. They may think that if they indict someone, that it makes them ineligible to run for president. I mean, there's some states that I think you actually can be disqualified from being on a ballot if you have an open indictment. Look, I think it will embolden his supporters. Okay, I think it will enrage his supporters, make them feel stronger about the fact that they're politicizing the justice system. But I think a prosecutor would say, he's a very democratic prosecutor, has been supported by the far left, going after perhaps the most far right guy you have out there. And I think he's thinking, if I prosecute him, I take him out of candidacy. And again, that is not what a prosecutor's office should be doing.
Well, and of course, an indictment would not mean he couldn't run. Now, if he's charged, Joe, is he prepared? The former president, Trump, is he prepared to appear in court and defend himself?
Okay. So one thing I'll tell you about Donald Trump in my time knowing him and representing him and having the honor to represent him is he's probably the toughest guy I've ever met, because most people would buckle under this pressure. Is he prepared? He's prepared. I'm prepared. Susan Nicholas is prepared. My co-counsel is actually running lead on this thing. We're all prepared because this case will be eaten up. It fails on the law and it fails on the facts. So, yeah, he's prepared. Does he want this to happen? Of course not. Does anyone want to be charged falsely with a crime because of political persecution? Of course not. But again, it's the facts in the law that all we have to look at is the facts of the law. And the law is very clear. Campaign finance law is very clear. You have scholars and former chairman of the federal and state campaign finance law committees who have all opined. Show me one who says differently that these facts make out a crime. They do not.
Well, the only thing I'd say is if it's going to embolden his supporters and help him, why wouldn't you just want him to go ahead and charge? If you think there's no merit in it, emboldens his supporters. Sort of sounds like you're talking out of both sides of your mouth.
No, it doesn't. That's not at all. I'm saying I believe that will be the end result of this. Don't say I'm talking out both sides of my mouth, because I'm not. I'm not saying it's a great thing if he gets indicted. I said if they indict him, it will embolden him. I think it will, because he will win this case, it will catapult him to the White House. That's what I said. What I'm also saying is that no one in their right mind wants to be indicted and charged falsely with a crime. So I don't think that's talking out both sides of my mouth. I'm just stating facts. I think it will ultimately embolden his supporters and give him more strength because it will be proven to be wrongly accused. But on the other hand, who in their right mind wants to be indicted and charged falsely with a crime? Nobody.
All right, Joe Tacopina, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Okay, Aaron. Bye-bye.
And now Ryan Goodman, former special counsel at the Department of Defense and co-editor-in-chief of the Just Security blog. So here we are. A likely indictment is pending here. What's your takeaway from Joe Tacopina?
So I thought what was most curious is what he didn't want to talk about or didn't talk about. So he's talking about things that are either not crimes or not the central crime. So he wants to talk about nobody would be charged for hush money. Well, that's actually true because it's not paying hush money is not a crime.
Right.
Then he wants to talk about the campaign finance charges. And he's got a point there. That is actually shakier. But the central charge that Alvin Bragg is probably going to bring is falsifying business records, and that is that when they paid Michael Cohen, they did not say that the payment was for its true purpose. Instead, they said it was legal services, and then he was on a retainer, and that is what the central charge is in the case. Admittedly, just a misdemeanor, but everything builds off of that.
Right. Now, just a misdemeanor on that. I mean, just to be clear, and look, charges are charges, and there's a lot of other cases out there, but a misdemeanor, I mean, you're talking about a fine.
That's right.
If,
I don't think
if convicted.
If it all boils down to just that charge and it's just the misdemeanor, then this is not about Donald Trump facing jail time. And there's a good chance that that is exactly what happens with this case.
Right, which may be, in fact, why they chose not to bring it before. Unclear, right, whether more information came in, as Joe and I were talking about. But if this happens, it'll be the first indictment of possibly several, right? Because you've got the January 6th, you've got the classified documents, you've got Fulton County, Georgia. And in that case, we have learned that there's a new phone call that we did not know about, that we have not heard about, that was Trump. And he made this call to the Georgia House Speaker. And it was, to push for a special session to overturn the election. Okay, so now we know about the existence of this phone call. This is the third audio recording to officials in the state from Trump on that. But again, we did not know about this till now. How valuable is the evidence?
I think it's incredibly valuable because it's not just the existence of this phone call in which he's trying to, it seems like, pressure the House Speaker to set up a special session where the House Speaker, GOP leader, pushes back. Mm-hmm. But it's an audio recording of the phone call. That's very important. It's vivid information that has its kind of inherent reliability and credibility for a jury. That can be very compelling for a jury. Now they'll have at least three audio recordings. I think it really does empower the prosecutor.